The diversification of Macau's economy, whose myth is still being spread by those who do not know what else to say, has long been dead and buried. The different governments have had neither the wit nor the skill to turn political discourse into reality, and the consequences loom on the horizon. We have been recalled to reality by a virus that is changing the routine of our days. Without tourists, without casino players, Macau's greatest sources of wealth, times of austerity were announced. When casinos were flooding the city with cash, government officials tried to avoid those words like a plague: casino, gaming, gambling. They appeared ashamed of the origin of the wealth, but were not shy about congratulating themselves for the city's development made possible by that wealth. Now, they say it's time to cut costs, to cut expenses and investments. The decision would even be understandable if it were studied rather than a sudden reaction. As the historical record demonstrates, many of Macau's existing policies were born of such panic, springing suddenly out of a yum-cha, and that's it. These policies, with generational impacts, come about with as much forethought as when one of us goes to the supermarket and while looking at the shelves remembers, I also need cookies. There are no strategies, not even a clear understanding of what expenditures are unnecessary and should therefore be cut, because most of the spending is secret. In the past 5 years, government agencies have spent nearly 1 billion patacas on studies and other consultancy services, but only 12% was made known to the public. In other words, we know more or less how a little more than 100 million patacas were spent. We can only guess about the rest, hidden behind a black curtain of opacity drawn by those who have the ostensible duty to foster transparency. Let's not even mention the need for such studies and the way they are done. Everything escapes us. But the purpose of this message is to talk about cash and to discuss what should be cut in the first place. As a deputy from the so-called democratic area recently recalled, of the thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of patacas given to local associations, history does not tell. Government subsidized association accounts are anything but transparent. Now, if we link the existence of those many associations, many of them headed by members who are part of the consultative councils of the various government structures, we realize the need for greater transparency. Failure to do so only validates the voices that say, albeit in a whisper, that this opacity only serves to foster an eternal cycle of political and nepotistic patronage. This money, a lot of money, goes into the pockets of associations managed by many people who operate within the government's consultation mechanisms and thus wield great power and influence. Such people are appointed by the criteria defined by those who govern. They spend money without supervision. Need I say more? Expenses must be cut. That is not in question. These are difficult times, but we must make the first cuts where they can be most easily afforded, namely from the fabulous sums that are squandered annually within a maze of baseless and unaccountable decisions. Without transparency, spending cuts will only harm public services and citizens' quality of life, while irresponsible spending continues to drain public coffers. Result: the savings intention will become another myth as great as the diversification of Macau's economy.